My wife cheated on me with a taxi driver. She tried to blame me, but when I found out what they did in the car, I've never been the type to air my dirty laundry online, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest. Maybe writing it down will help me figure out where it all went wrong. I've been married to my wife, Megan, for 6 years. We don't have kids, just 2 jobs and a shared love for hiking and lazy weekends binge-watching whatever new show is trending. At least, that's how things used to be. About 6 months ago, Megan started using Uber and Lyft constantly. At first, I didn't think much of it. We live in the city, and sometimes it's just easier than driving, right? She'd say she didn't feel like parking or that she was just tired after work. It made sense at first, but after a while it felt off. She started getting rides from the same guy, some driver named Todd. She even brought him up a couple of times in casual conversation, like, "Oh, Todd was so funny today. He made me laugh the whole ride home." I didn't think too much of it. I should have. Looking back, there were other signs too. She started staying out later, saying she had work events or needed to catch up with old friends. I never thought Megan would cheat. She always had this sharp edge to her, sure, but it wasn't anything that made me think she'd stray. We argued here and there, but nothing crazy. If anything, she was more distant and easily irritated, but I chalked it up to stress from work. Turns out, I was being played like a fool. It all came crashing down last week. I was working from home, wrapping up a late conference call, when I noticed Megan had been gone a little longer than usual. She said she was running out for some errands. Nothing out of the ordinary, but it was almost 10 p.m. and I hadn't heard from her. Something in my gut told me to check the Uber app on her phone. She had left it charging in the kitchen. I never snooped through her stuff before, but I felt this weird nagging in the back of my head, like something wasn't right. I opened the app and saw the same driver's name, Todd. Same guy. Over and over again. She had been using him almost exclusively for the past few months. That's when I noticed something odd. The ride she took that night wasn't listed as completed. I clicked on it and saw they were still in the same location, parked about 2 miles away. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, not even sure what I was going to find. I just knew I had to see for myself. I drove like a madman until I pulled up to the address from the app. It was a dark side street, mostly empty except for a couple of parked cars. And there, under a flickering streetlight, was Todd's car. Megan was in the back seat. I parked a few yards away and just watched, my stomach twisting into knots. And that's when I saw it, her and Todd, in the back seat, wrapped up in each other like I didn't even exist. I couldn't believe my eyes. They weren't even trying to hide it. I sat there, frozen, not sure if I was going to scream, cry, or throw up. I didn't think. I just reacted. I got out of the car and marched over to Todd's vehicle, heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists. As soon as I reached the window, I saw them clearly, Megan on top of him, the windows fogged up like some cliché I never thought would happen in real life. I banged on the window so hard I thought I might break it. Megan jumped, her face turning pale as she scrambled to get off him. Todd looked just as shocked, fumbling to pull his pants back on. "What the hell is this, Megan?" I yelled, my voice cracking with anger and hurt. "You think this is okay?" In the back of some random guy's car? She opened the door, hair disheveled and her shirt buttoned wrong. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, already starting to lie. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Really? Because it looks like you're screwing some guy in his car." Todd didn't say a word, just kept his head down like a coward, probably hoping I wouldn't deck him. Megan, though, was already on the defense, like she had a script ready. We weren't. I was just drunk, and it's not like it means anything," she said, her voice climbing into that hysterical pitch she always used when she was trying to dodge responsibility. I just stood there, staring at her, the betrayal sinking in deeper. I couldn't believe how casually she was trying to brush it off, like I hadn't just caught her in the middle of sleeping with someone else. I couldn't believe it. Even after catching her red-handed, Megan had the nerve to stand there and lied to my face. She pulled herself out of the car, wobbling on her heels, and crossed her arms like she was the one who should be mad. "You're overreacting, okay?" she snapped, her tone shifting. "It's not like we've been together for months or anything. It was a stupid mistake. I was drunk. It's not serious." I felt my blood boiling. "You've been riding with this guy for months. Don't tell me this is a first time." Her eyes darted away, just for a second, but it was enough. "I didn't mean for it to happen, okay?" she shouted, her voice turning shrill. "It's just he listens to me. You're always so busy, and I needed someone to talk to." "Talk to," I repeated, almost laughing at how absurd it sounded. "You've been sneaking around behind my back to talk in his car?" Todd finally spoke up, still buttoning his shirt. "Hey, man, I didn't mean to." I cut him off, raising my hand. "Don't even. This isn't about you." Megan's face turned red. "I don't know why you're making this such a big deal. It's not like you've been paying much attention to me lately either," she hissed, like it was somehow my fault that she ended up here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had she been cheating, but now she was trying to flip it on me, as if I drove her into some random driver's arms. After Megan's attempt to shift the blame onto me, I stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to believe her. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe it was just a one-time mistake. She looked so panicked, scrambling for excuses, that I almost convinced myself that it was just some horrible misunderstanding. But something inside me wasn't buying it. The way she was too quick to blame me, the sudden anger and defensiveness, it didn't sit right. Still, I didn't want to explode right then and there in front of Todd in the middle of the street. So I did the only thing I could think of at that moment. I walked away. I told her I needed some space, that we'd talk when I got home. She just stood there, glaring at me, her arms crossed, muttering something under her breath. I didn't even care to ask what she said. I got in my car and drove off, but my mind was spinning. Back at home, I paced around the living room, trying to calm down, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together in that car. How could she do this? I kept replaying every little detail of our relationship over the last few months, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. Had I missed the signs? Was I too caught up in work? Megan had always been sharp-tongued, a little high-strung, but I never thought she'd go this far. I mean, we had our fights, who doesn't? But cheating? It just didn't seem like something she'd do. Yet there she was with him, right in front of me, and then something hit me. This wasn't the first time. No, it couldn't be. The way she was so comfortable with her lies, so quick to make excuses. It wasn't the reaction of someone who had made a one-time mistake. This was deeper. I grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, the same one she always left lying around like she had nothing to hide. But tonight, I was going to check. I never believed in snooping before, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I opened the Uber app again. I wanted to see just how many times this Todd had been her driver. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her ride history. It wasn't just a few rides here and there. No, it was dozens. Over the last few months, almost every time she'd taken an Uber, it was with him. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just some innocent rideshare arrangement. She had been riding with him over and over again, using these rides as excuses to be with him. And suddenly, her late nights at work and the endless excuses about staying out late made perfect sense. It was like a puzzle falling into place. A puzzle I wished I'd never started to solve. As I sat there, staring at her ride history, a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just the frequent trips with Todd that bothered me. It was a pattern. She'd ride with him almost every other day, and the rides were longer than they should have been for just going to work or running errands. Some of them were at odd hours, too, times when she'd told me she was working late or out with friends. I started checking dates, comparing them to times she'd come home late or smelled like she'd been drinking. It all lined up. I could feel my stomach twisting as I scrolled back even further. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? But then, something else caught my eye. One ride in particular stood out. It wasn't listed as a trip to or from work, or even anywhere familiar. It was to a small hotel just outside of the city. My heart pounded as I clicked on it. The timestamp showed it was 2 weeks ago, on a night when she told me she was at a work dinner. I felt sick. My hands were shaking as I checked the messages on her phone. I hadn't planned on going this far, but now I needed answers. The texts with Todd were mostly deleted, but I managed to find a few, enough to confirm what I feared. There were flirty messages, talks about meeting up later, and how much she missed seeing him. She hadn't even bothered to hide it well. And then the final blow, I found a picture. It was of Megan and Todd in what looked like the back seat of his car. She was leaning in close to him, her hand on his chest, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. It was from that same night. She claimed to be at a work dinner. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a fling. They'd been meeting regularly, going places together, spending nights at hotels. This had been happening under my nose for God knows how long. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My chest tightened, my head spinning with disbelief and anger. How could she do this? How could she lie to me day after day and then act like nothing was wrong? I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw the phone in her face and demand answers. But the other part of me, the part that was still in shock, was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at that picture, trying to wrap my head around the betrayal. Megan wasn't home yet, but I knew I had to face her when she walked through the door. And this time, I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of it. By the time Megan got home, I was sitting on the couch, gripping her phone in my hand like it was a ticking time bomb. I had gone over everything in my head 100 times, imagining how the confrontation would play out. But now, as I heard her keys jingling in the lock, the anger that had been boiling inside me all day finally reached its breaking point. She walked in, casual as ever, dropping her purse on the table. "Hey," she said, not even glancing at me. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." I didn't respond. I just stared at her, my chest tight, waiting for her to notice the storm brewing. When she finally looked over at me, her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" I held up her phone, displaying the photo of her and Todd, the one I'd found in the back seat of his car. Her face turned pale. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice colder than I expected. She froze, her eyes widening as she realized I wasn't bluffing. For a split second, I saw real panic in her eyes. But then, in typical Megan fashion, she quickly switched gears. "Oh my God," she huffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Are you seriously going to my phone now? I can't believe you're spying on me." I stood up, unable to keep my composure any longer. "Don't turn this on me, Megan. You've been lying to my face for months. Who is Todd? What are you doing meeting him at hotels and spending hours with him in his car?" She threw her hands up in the air, acting like she was a victim here. "I can't believe this. I told you, we're just friends. You're acting like a jealous lunatic. There's nothing going on." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Friends? Do friends meet at hotels in the middle of the night? Do friends delete all their texts and lie about where they're going every other day? "You're being paranoid," she snapped, her voice rising. "It's not like I'm cheating on you. We just hang out. It's no big deal." "No big deal," I shouted, my anger finally spilling over. "I caught you in his car, Megan. I saw you with him. You were literally sleeping with him in the back seat." She stared at me, speechless for a moment, before the hysteria kicked in. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. You know what? You haven't exactly been Mr. Perfect either. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have to find someone who actually listens to me. Her words hit like a slap in the face. She was really going to stand there and blame me for her affair? For her sneaking around and lying for months? "Megan, you are unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been here. trying to keep this marriage together while you've been running around with your Uber driver like a damn joke. She crossed her arms, staring me down. Yeah, well, maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have had to. I stood there, stunned. I realized right then that she wasn't sorry. Not one bit. She didn't care that she'd broken my trust, that she betrayed me. She was only upset because she got caught. And that's when it clicked. There was no saving this. There was no going back. I stood there, staring at her, feeling completely numb. So, I'm boring? That's why you did this. She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't act surprised. You barely paid attention to me in months. What did you think was going to happen? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're blaming me for this? For sneaking around with your Uber driver? Megan's face twisted into a sneer. Maybe if you hadn't been so focused on work all the time, I wouldn't have had to. It was like a punch to the gut. Here I was, working my ass off to build a life for us, and she was throwing it all back in my face. You think that justifies what you've been doing? Lying to me? Sleeping with him in his car? She looked away, her anger fading slightly. It wasn't about him, it was about me. I needed something you weren't giving. I shook my head, grabbing my keys off the counter. I can't do this anymore, Megan. Her eyes widened. Wait, what do you mean? I didn't bother to explain. I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, still trying to process that this time there was no more talking, no more excuses. It was over. As I drove away, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I didn't even have a destination in mind. I just needed to get out of there, to get away from her, from the lies, from the betrayal. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. I pulled into a parking lot and sat there in the dark, my mind racing. How had things gotten this far? Just a few months ago, I thought we were okay, that maybe we were just going through a rough patch. I never imagined it would end like this. I couldn't believe I had actually walked out, but there was no going back now. For the first time in hours, I let myself feel the sadness. The shock and anger had kept me numb, but now it all crashed down on me. The loss, the betrayal, the end of everything I thought we had. Tears burned in my eyes, and I slammed my fist against the steering wheel. I wanted to call someone, but who? My friends didn't even know we were having issues. I hadn't told anyone about the fights, the coldness between us. I'd kept pretending everything was fine, and now it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, completely alone. Eventually, I pulled myself together. I needed to figure out my next move. I wasn't going back to that house. I couldn't. The thought of sleeping in the same bed where she'd been sneaking around behind my back made me sick. I had to do something final, something that would make sure I didn't end up falling back into her lies again. And that's when I knew what I had to do. Divorce. There was no saving this. No fixing it. I had to end it for good. The word divorce felt heavy in my mind, but there was no other option left. Megan had crossed a line we could never come back from. No amount of apologies or explanations would fix what she'd done. I was done pretending that we could work through it. I spent the night in a cheap hotel on the outskirts of town, just trying to clear my head. The room was quiet, but my mind was anything but. I kept replaying everything. Her lies, the betrayal, the way she had tried to turn it all on me. How had I missed the signs for so long? How could I have been so blind? In the morning, I called a lawyer. I hadn't even fully processed the fact that I was about to end my marriage, but I knew I couldn't wait. If I gave it time, I might start second-guessing myself, and that was the last thing I needed. I needed to move fast, before Megan had a chance to twist things again. The lawyer I spoke to was direct, no nonsense. He told me what I needed to do, what documents to gather, and what the process would look like. It all felt so surreal. Talking about dividing assets and signing papers when just a day ago, I thought we were just two people in a rough patch. I didn't even know how Megan would react. Would she fight it? Beg me to stay? Try to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her again? It didn't matter. I was resolved. I couldn't trust her anymore, and without trust, what was left? When I got back to the house to collect some things, she was waiting. As soon as I walked in, she started talking, trying to explain, to spin some new version of events. But I didn't let her get far. "I'm filing for divorce, Megan," I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. She froze, staring at me like she hadn't seen it coming. "You can't be serious. You're really going to throw all of this away over one mistake?" "One mistake." I shook my head. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him. This isn't just one mistake. This is who you are now." Her face hardened. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "If that's what you want, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you." And that was it. No tears, no apologies. Just cold acceptance. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. Once the words, "I'm filing for divorce," were out, it was like a switch flipped. Megan didn't fight, didn't cry. She just stared at me, arms crossed, like this was all just another inconvenience. It stung, but at the same time, it confirmed everything. She didn't care. Maybe she never did. I packed a few more things while she watched me in silence. The house felt cold, like the life had drained out of it. Every corner seemed tainted by her betrayal, by the lies she'd spun so easily. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a shell, full of memories I didn't want to face. As I zipped up my bag, Megan finally spoke. "You're really going through with this? Just like that?" I looked at her, trying to understand how she could be so detached. "What do you want me to do, Megan? Pretend this didn't happen? Pretend you didn't throw away our marriage for some guy you barely know?" She rolled her eyes, her voice sharp. "I made a mistake, all right? People mess up. You're acting like I committed some kind of crime." "A mistake," I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. "You've been lying for months, sneaking around with him, and you're calling it a mistake?" She crossed her arms again, her face hardening. "Fine. You want a divorce? Do it. You think you're so perfect? Go ahead and leave. It's not like I need you." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. "I'm done, Megan. I've already contacted a lawyer." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Maybe regret, maybe fear. But she quickly masked it with her usual defiance. "Fine. Do whatever you want." There was nothing left to say. I grabbed my bag, walked out the door, and didn't look back. As I drove away, I felt the weight lifting. It was painful, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. After leaving the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger. They all swirled together, but at least now I had a sense of direction. I was taking control of my life again. No more lies. No more pretending things were fine. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer the next day. Sitting in his office, discussing the logistics of dividing assets, it all felt so cold and transactional. We talked about the house, our bank accounts, even the car. But the hardest part was hearing the lawyer refer to Megan as the other party. It made everything seem so impersonal, like our 6 years of marriage were being boiled down to paperwork. But I knew this was necessary. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on deceit. As we went over the details, the lawyer asked, "Do you think she'll fight you on this?" I thought about it. Megan had been so indifferent, so dismissive when I told her about the divorce. Part of me wanted to believe she wouldn't make it difficult, but I'd seen how quickly she could change, how easily she could go from defensive to angry in a heartbeat. "I'm not sure," I replied, feeling uneasy. "She might. She's unpredictable." He nodded, making notes. "We'll prepare for that. If it gets messy, we'll be ready." Messy. That word stuck with me. I hadn't thought much about the aftermath. How Megan might react once the reality of the divorce set in. Would she come after me for more than her fair share? Would she try to twist the narrative, play the victim? I wouldn't put it past her. After the meeting, I felt drained. The legal side of things was just the beginning. The real challenge would be facing Megan again, knowing that every conversation could turn into another argument, another attempt to manipulate the situation. I wasn't sure what to expect from her, but I knew one thing. I had to stay strong. This was the only way forward. As I drove home, I thought about all the nights I had spent trying to fix our marriage, all the times I had pushed my own doubts aside to trust her. Now, I realized that trust had been shattered long before I caught her with Todd. She had been lying to me for months, maybe even longer, and no matter how much I wanted to salvage the good memories, there was no going back. I thought things would stay civil, at least for a while. Megan seemed so indifferent when I first mentioned the divorce, so I assumed she'd go along with it. But I was wrong. As soon as she got served the divorce papers, the real Megan came out, angry, bitter, and out for blood. The first time I saw her after she got the papers, she showed up at my temporary place. I barely opened the door before she barged in, waving the documents in my face. "So, this is how it's going to be, huh? You think you're just going to throw me out of your life like this?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Megan, you knew this was coming. You didn't even try to fix things." She scoffed, her voice full of venom. "You're the one giving up. You're the one who ran away. You're so weak you can't even handle a little bump in the road." A bump in the road? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You cheated on me for months, Megan. You lied every single day. How is that just a bump in the road?" She rolled her eyes like my words meant nothing. "So what? It didn't mean anything. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I felt my anger rising, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "I'm not doing this with you. This is over. You need to move on." But she wasn't done. "Oh, I'm moving on, all right," she snapped. "And I'm not leaving empty-handed. You think you're just going to waltz away with everything? The house, the money? Think again." I should have seen it coming. Megan was never going to walk away quietly. Now that the divorce was real, she was going to make it as painful as possible. "You're not entitled to everything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll split things fairly." "Fairly?" She laughed bitterly. "You're the one who ruined this marriage, not me. If anyone deserves more, it's me." I couldn't take it anymore. "You're unbelievable, Megan. You're the one who cheated, and now you want to play the victim." She threw her hands up. "Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have had to go looking for something else." That was it. I didn't say another word. I just opened the door and waited for her to leave. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in. I knew this wasn't the end of it. Megan wasn't going to let go easily, but I wasn't backing down. I was done letting her control the narrative. The divorce had turned ugly, but I was ready for it. She had already taken everything from me emotionally. She wasn't going to take anything else. After Megan stormed out, I knew the divorce was going to get ugly. What I didn't expect was just how far she was willing to go. Over the next few weeks, she turned vindictive, calling me at all hours of the night, sending nasty texts, and even trying to trash my reputation with mutual friends. It didn't take long for people to start talking. Megan spun her own version of the story, one where I was the bad guy, the neglectful husband who drove her into someone else's arms. She conveniently left out the part where she'd been sneaking around with Todd for months. She made it seem like her affair was just a symptom of a bigger problem, me. Our friends started taking sides, and to be honest, I wasn't surprised by who believed her lies. Megan had always been good at playing the victim, twisting situations to suit her narrative. I'd seen her do it to others. I just never thought she'd do it to me. One day, I got a call from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. He told me Megan had been spreading rumors about me, saying I was emotionally abusive and that's why she had no choice but to cheat. I couldn't believe it. Not only had she betrayed me, but now she was actively trying to destroy what little dignity I had left. At first, I was furious. I wanted to fight back, to tell everyone the real story, to show them the proof I had, photos, messages, everything. But my lawyer advised me against it. He said the best thing I could do was keep my head down, stay calm, and let the legal process play out. Don't let her drag you into the mud, he said. That's what she wants. It was hard, though. Every time I got a new text or heard from another friend about the latest lies she was spreading, it took everything in me not to retaliate. I wanted to defend myself, to scream the truth from the rooftops. But deep down, I knew that engaging with her would only make things worse. Meanwhile, the divorce process was dragging on. Megan contested everything, trying to take more than her fair share, demanding things she knew weren't hers. She was making it personal, trying to drain me emotionally and financially. Every time we tried to negotiate, she'd find some way to turn it into a fight. I realized then that this wasn't about the money or the house. This was about control. Megan had lost control when I walked out, and now she was grasping at anything she could to make me suffer for it. But no matter how hard she pushed, I didn't budge. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The weeks dragged on, and the divorce battle turned into a war of attrition. Megan did everything she could to make things difficult, delaying paperwork, throwing out new demands, and continuing her smear campaign. But as time went on, something shifted inside me. I started to let go. At first, I was consumed by the anger, the betrayal, the need to prove I was a victim in all of this. But slowly, I realized that holding on to all that pain was only giving Megan more power. She wanted to see me miserable. She wanted to see me break, and I refused to give her that satisfaction. The legal process eventually came to an end. The house was sold, our assets divided, and Megan walked away with more than she deserved, but less than she wanted. I wasn't happy about how things played out, but I was done fighting. All I wanted was peace, to rebuild my life and move forward. The first day after everything was finalized, I woke up feeling lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in the mess of my marriage. Megan was out of my life, for good. Sure, she still popped up here and there, rumors, whispers, people asking questions, but I stopped caring. She could say whatever she wanted. I knew the truth, and that was enough for me. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with old friends, people who had distanced themselves during the drama. Some of them had heard Megan's lies, but once they saw the real story, they came back around. The people who stuck by me through the mess were the ones who mattered, and I was grateful for them. I also realized something important. This wasn't just about Megan. This was about me. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to make my marriage work, that I had forgotten about myself. I had let her lies and manipulation control me for too long. Now, I had the chance to rebuild, to figure out what I wanted from life, and that's exactly what I planned to do. Looking back, I learned a hard lesson about trust, loyalty, and knowing when to walk away. I gave Megan too many chances, ignored too many red flags. But I won't make that mistake again. I'm not the same person I was when this started, and for that, I'm grateful. If there's one piece of advice I can offer to anyone going through something similar, it's this. Don't let someone else's lies define your worth. Know when to stand up for yourself, and know when it's time to let go. Life moves on, and so will you.